All right. Today, we are diving into the story of a generation that's kind of been hiding in plain sight. You know the one. They're often called the middle child, squeezed between the boomers and the millennials. Usually, they get painted as cynical, maybe a little bit lazy, and ultimately forgotten. But what if all those stereotypes are just flat out wrong? What if being ignored was actually their greatest strength?
This quote right here, it pretty much nails the stereotype, doesn't it? Gen X, born roughly between 1965 and 1980, got stuck with this label of being the forgotten ones. But I've got to ask, what if that whole story is a myth? What if being overlooked was actually their superpower? What if it let them build a totally different kind of influence way outside of the spotlight?
You see, to really get Gen X, you have to go back and understand their childhood. They weren't just a product of the 70s and 80s, they were shaped by this kind of unsupervised freedom that honestly seems almost alien today. This right here is the key to unlocking who they are and that radical self-reliance they carried into their adult lives. Just look at this perfect storm of events. You've got more women joining the workforce, divorce rates are climbing, and suddenly millions of kids have the house to themselves after school. This is where the whole latchkey generation comes from. And while their parents were out working, a new kind of babysitter moved in, the television, blasting MTV 24/7, and of course, the personal computer, booting up in the corner of their bedroom. They were basically learning about the world entirely on their own terms.
You know, an upbringing like that, it fundamentally changes you. When you're the one figuring out what to make for dinner, how to fix the VCR when it eats a tape, and how to get your homework done with no one looking over your shoulder, you just become fiercely independent. You turn into a problem solver out of pure necessity. And hey, when you see the so-called rules of the adult world, like a job for life or a marriage that's supposed to last forever, crumbling for your own parents, you learn to question, well, everything.
And this is what you get. That kid, figuring it all out alone, grew up into an adult who could really stand on their own 2 feet. For them, self-reliance wasn't some cool personality trait. It was a survival skill. And that foundation of independence is absolutely the key to understanding the rest of their story, especially when it comes to their totally revolutionary approach to work. Which brings us to maybe the biggest lie ever told about Gen X, the whole slacker myth. I mean, pop culture in the 90s loved to paint them as lazy and apathetic, defined by grunge music and this sort of general vibe of not trying too hard. But the reality? Oh, couldn't be more different. Think about it. Gen X had a front row seat to their boomer parents' burnout. They watched them live to work, pouring everything they had into one company only to get a pink slip during the recessions in the 80s. So what did Gen X do? They completely flipped the script. They decided to work to live. Forget the corporate ladder. They wanted a toolkit of different skills and experiences. Their goal wasn't just job security. It was freedom.
And that term we all throw around constantly now, work-life balance? Yeah, Gen X basically invented that. It wasn't about slacking off at all. It was a really pragmatic, direct reaction to watching their parents trade their lives for a paycheck. They wanted a career for sure, but they demanded a life to go along with it. And that one idea, it changed the modern workplace forever.
Still think they're slackers? Well, try this on for size. 68%. That's the percentage of Fortune 500 CEOs who are from Generation X. They weren't slacking, they were strategizing. They were just quietly climbing to the top and taking over, and they brought that no-nonsense, results-first attitude right along with them.
Now, this pragmatic, just-get-it-done approach didn't stop at the office door. Nope. It completely defines how they deal with the digital world. They weren't born with a smartphone in their hand like later generations, but they weren't afraid of it either. They're what you might call tech-intentional. They adopted technology, but on their own terms, using it as a tool, not as a stage. And the data makes this crystal clear. They are overwhelmingly on social media, especially on established platforms that serve a really clear purpose, with Facebook pretty much being their home base. They might be a little slower to jump on the bandwagon with newer apps like TikTok, but they're not absent. They just need to see the utility first. For them, it's not about hype, it's all about value.
This quote just nails it. Their skepticism isn't about being scared of technology, it's about knowing it too well. Just like they had to figure out that first PC all by themselves, they see modern tech as just another tool. They remember a world before social media, so they see all the curated perfection for what it is, a performance. They know the price of admission is their time and attention, and they're not always willing to pay it.
So what does this actually look like in practice? Well, it's a pretty straightforward two-step process. First, they'll use social media to discover what's new out there.
But they're definitely not buying anything just because an influencer posted about it. Nope. They grew up with search engines, so when it's time to get serious, they head straight to Google to do their own research. For Gen X, social media is the appetizer. The main course is a deep dive into the actual facts. So, with all this time they spend online, you really have to wonder, are they falling for the same social media hype as everyone else? Are they making impulse buys based on whatever the latest viral trend is?
Not a chance. A full 50% say social media has zero impact on what they buy, and another 31% haven't bought a single thing influenced by social media in the last 6 months. That famous Gen X skepticism, it's like a built-in ad blocker. They see the hype, but they're not buying it, literally. So what we have here is a generation that's independent, pragmatic, and deeply skeptical. And while everybody was looking the other way, arguing about boomers and millennials, Gen X just quietly became the most powerful force in the entire economy. And the numbers, well, the numbers don't lie.
But first, we have to be real about the insane pressure they're under. They are the original sandwich generation, caught right in the middle of raising their own kids and caring for their aging parents. The financial squeeze is so intense. We're talking huge credit card debt, not enough savings for an emergency. It is a really tough place to be.
But, and this is a big but, even with all that pressure, check this out. 31%. That is how much of the total income in the United States is earned by Gen X. Even though they're the smallest generation by population, their financial muscle is just huge. They aren't just surviving the squeeze, they are powering right through it. And they're not just earning that money. Oh, they are spending it. They're right in their peak earning years, and the data shows they outspend every other generation on everything from houses to clothes to going out to eat. Seriously, any grand that's not paying attention to them is making a very, very expensive mistake.
In this number, this one brings it all right back full circle. 55%. That's how many startup founders are Gen X. Remember that independent, problem-solving, latchkey kid who had to figure things out all alone? This is what they grew up to be. The builders, the innovators, the ones who create something brand new out of nothing.
This quote just perfectly captures their role, doesn't it? They're not always the ones in the spotlight, but they are the engine that keeps the whole machine running. They're the seasoned leaders, the no-nonsense managers, and the quiet innovators who are actually, getting things done.
So let's just tear down these old myths once and for all. The slacker? Nope. That's the CEO and the founder. The cynic? Nah, more like the pragmatist. Tech illiterate? Not at all. They're tech intentional. And the forgotten child? No way. They're the engine room. So that whole story about them being neglected and forgotten? It's just wrong. While the world was busy obsessing over boomers and millennials, Gen X wasn't sitting around waiting to be noticed. They were way too busy building things. Families, careers, companies. They were quietly changing the world, and most of us didn't even realize it was happening. They got called the lost generation. But when you look at who they've become, these self-reliant leaders, these innovators, these builders, it makes you wonder, maybe they weren't lost at all. Maybe, just maybe, they were the first generation to realize the old map was useless, so they threw it out and decided to draw their own. And maybe we've all been following it ever since.